Hey guys, our guest today is Izzy Reyes. The reason why I wanted to have him on is because I feel that we don't have a lot of representation as Hispanics out there showing in media that we can succeed in business as entrepreneurs, that we can have thriving careers out there in the field. And in my conversation with Izzy, it was amazing, and we touched on a lot of great topics that I think are definitely very relevant to us, to our community, and to us as Hispanics. You know, we talk about what is the rat race. You know, what does it mean to own your own business? How do you get into making passive income? What does passive income even mean? Can you achieve it through only the stock market, or is real estate also another option? So I had a ton of fun interviewing him. I learned a great deal from him in this interview, and I hope that you guys find value in this interview. Hey man, how's it going?
How are you, Manny?
I'm
Again.
good. It's been a while, right?
Absolutely.
So I wanted to have you on so we can talk about a few things that I feel our community could use some more information on. Things like real estate. What is the rat race? What does that even mean? You know, we can talk a little bit about business and just overall things that may not necessarily be talked about on a regular. But before we even get started on that, I just wanted to get a little bit of your origin story. Like, who was Izzy when he was a kid, when he was a child, when he was, in high school? Like, give us a little bit of snippet of your upbringing.
Yeah. Born in Puerto Rico, migrated when I was 3 years old to Rochester, New York. Spent a couple years there. Couple years we moved to Cambridge. And when I was about 8 years old, moved to Lawrence. We had family here. Spent all my years, pretty much my youth, young adult life, in Lawrence. And over the last 3 years, I've split my time between the Lawrence market and Atlanta, Georgia market. Growing up, the late 70s, early 80s, if anyone is familiar with Lawrence, it was, that's where there was a transition between the Hispanic population and there was Italian, Irish population. That's the Hispanic population was starting to boom in the 80s, primarily with the Puerto Rican population. And most recently, you got a lot of the Dominican and the South American population moving in, but it's still known as the immigrant city, right? So growing up, went to the Brew School up in Lower Tower Hill. Was lucky enough to get a scholarship to go to Central Catholic. Graduated from Central Catholic. Got a scholarship to Salem State College, now known as Salem State University. Dropped out my sophomore year. Hated my co-op job and wanted to start my own little small business. And that was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because it started to give me a sense of responsibility, because I felt lost. I was an impressionable kid, wanted to be part of the right, at least what I thought, the right group of people, but just leading me to a path of nowhere and trouble, if anything. And when I started my first business when I was a sophomore, I knew that entrepreneurship was for me. I was not, liking the 9-to-5 job. I did have some contractual work, and I've had some employment opportunities that helped my career along the way. But the last 23 plus years, it's been real estate related, and it's been a blessing being part of it.
So before we get into the real estate, so you did mention that most of your life was spent here in Lawrence. Now, Lawrence today gets an extremely bad rep. I mean, I've been to a few jobs, and whenever I mention that I live in Lawrence, I get like a little bit of a side stare, like, "Oh, Lawrence." Um, and I'm assuming that when you were growing up, Lawrence wasn't any better. You did mention that you did end up getting a scholarship to Central, and then you ended up going to college. And most people hearing that part of it would think to themselves, well, typical Lawrence kid, they tried going to college and then they dropped out, and people would view that as a failure. So somebody that's hearing that, how do you how would you speak to the fact that this quote unquote failure in their eyes actually led you to the success that you have today?
Well, it just taught me that there's easier paths, right? Because after I was on the 11-year plan, because as I matured, grew up, I realized that I wanted to, I thought it was important at that time, anyways, to finish my degree. I didn't necessarily want to pursue what I was majoring in, but at that time I just said, I just want to finish my degree. It was in criminal justice. So, I mean, from the start of my freshman year to the time that I actually got my degree, it took 11 years and take about 5 to 6 years of, hiatus from not attending college. So I include that. So it took about 4 or 5 years of just traveling back and forth between Lawrence, and it was the hard path, right? Now you're married, you got a house, you got kids, you know, and it's a lot harder working and then commuting at nighttime versus doing it while I was younger and getting it out of the way. So,
So
but it was
your
hard.
career took so it took you 11 years to get your degree at the end of the day.
At the end of the day, when I first entered my freshman year to the time I got my criminal justice degree, it was 11 years.
So for me growing up, my parents' recipe for success, and I think it's still a prominent staple today, is you need to go to school, you need to go to college, get a degree, and somehow that's going to set you up for life. And that's going to be the end all be all. Do you feel like, was there some type of pressure for you to finish that degree, and was that what drove you to do it and take 11 years to do it, or what kind of drove you to still pursue that degree even though you were doing other stuff?
I was sold. I think a lot differently now, but I was sold that the college degree, if you don't have it or have some type of certification or trade, and I was not in the trade, I was not a tradesman, that you'd be the loser, right? And you're a winner if you have a degree. And the degree essentially is setting you up for a job and a career. A lot of folks before us, our parents and their parents, they grew up under the environment of you get the degree and they worked 1 to 2 jobs. Now that in today's day and age, that doesn't exist. People are having 5, 6, 7 jobs throughout their careers, if not more. I
How
have a
much
different.
was just out of curiosity, how much did it cost to go to college back then? Because you hear now and people are talking about like 50,000 a year. So most people are coming out with a debt of like $200,000 coming out of school, or maybe 100,000. Was it that
Yeah,
much then, or?
well, again, it exponentially has been growing and growing, the tuition rates, and I have a very strong view on it now, um, and I have to balance it with my. We have 3 daughters, so I have to balance it with uh, my wife's views um, in regards to what we would like to see for our children. So I mean, I'm not saying college is bad, but I think that, you know, self-education, people feel like that once you get a degree or your diploma and that's it, they just fall off the cliff, and then they don't attend any more classes, webinars, read books. They never enter a library again. And it's funny, it's in my adult years that's all I do now is just education, education, education. You know, to get the information for today's day and age for a competitive market. And I'm not convinced that what they're teaching today in today's colleges and universities are preparing our children for it, for today's business environment.
You know, college is such a touchy subject, and I want to talk a little bit more about it because I think that's primarily I think it's still in the Hispanic community when we have we still have a lot of old school parents that just college is the only way for you to be able to provide for yourself, because I mean if we think about it, at the end of the day, you're going to school so you can get a job so then you can provide for yourself and your family. And you know, I even find friends that I know that in their minds, they believe that the college degree that they received was a mistake and they overpaid, but yet they're still pushing their own kids to go to college. So it's a weird kind of like mentality that I don't quite understand. If you yourself as a person saw that the college degree didn't serve you as well as you'd hoped, then I mean they still feel some type of pressure to push their kids to get a college degree and hope for something different. Like how do you manage that? How do you know work on that?
Yeah, I think that if you're in a trade if a doctor, a lawyer, you need to have that, you know, higher education learning.
100%.
But if you're just attending college to attend it to get some degree and think that that's the answer, I think people are sorely mistaken. And we don't have to go through all the folks that have dropped out of college and because they think that that's the magic, you know, answer, where they dropped out and they've done very, very well for themselves. Um, I think that adult learning is, you know, just as important, if not more important, to be honest with you. And that's going out and self-learning, you know, your industry and what you're passionate about, and creating, um, you know, passive residual income for yourself and your family. And what college degrees will do is prepare you for a job. And if that's your target, if that's what you want to do, then that may be a good path. But, you know, look at the currency and the devaluing dollar, look at the job markets. You know, things are shifting. Now everything's digital. And so, you know, things are changing pretty quickly. And if you don't have the tools to survive and excel in today's economy, then you're going to have a hard time, and you're going to start asking yourself and doubt yourself about, why did I just spend 100 upwards up to 200,000, whatever it may be, depending on the university, and I'm not really seeing the benefit um, and the return on my investment in that degree.
And I mean, I think one of the industries that's booming right now is a um, technology field, just in general, anything technology, and even lawyers. I'm seeing that there's a lot of websites that will literally, grab. Let's say you're looking for a lease or something, that you just put in your information, and it will boom do that for you. Things that you would hire a lawyer, pay him $200 to create a document for you. You do it, and you pay $10 to get it done. For me, I'm in the technology field. I'm a systems administrator, and I went to school for it. But I'm excited to see that Microsoft, even Facebook themselves, they're all getting together. They're creating basically their own universities online, where these things are like a quarter of the price, you get certified, and now you're ready to, work in, Microsoft technology or something else. So I'm really seeing a lot of new alternatives that maybe weren't there before when it comes to college, which is awesome to see.
Yeah, even universities are now getting into the e-learning online coursework and putting them on their platforms and offering it more. They say by 2025, the online learning, e-learning industry will be about $325 billion. And it's just several years back, it was a little over a billion. So
Oh
it's
yeah.
growing exponentially. Um, the brick and mortar universities and colleges are starting to take a hit. And now you look at what's happening now, there's a demand. There are a little over 2 billion people that migrated and were forced to migrate
Hmm.
to distance and online learning. So it's a growing sector, and people are migrating to it and seeking out what they're passionate about, what they want to learn, and taking those courses and making careers out of it for themselves.
I mean, it wasn't even too long ago, maybe 10 years ago, where you said you were taking, you're either getting a degree online or you're taking an online class, and people would look at you weird, like that wasn't as good.
Yep.
But but speaking of college, I'm sure that you read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad,
Yep.
right? That
Robert
was,
Kiyosaki.
yeah, exactly. That was one of the books that really like, got me going, and it is for a lot of people. And he does talk about, what you just mentioned, that if you want a good worker, get somebody that went to college, because that's what colleges turn out. They turn out workers.
Mhm.
So when it comes to this mentality of like whether you should be an entrepreneur or should you be a worker, um, where do you kind of find yourself when it comes in relation to that, and also this whole rat race thing that you also see in the book, but I don't think a lot of people still think about, like, I am really in a rat race when I enter this workforce that I'm just fueling, that I'm part of that cog that fuels this economy in that way.
It's funny you asked that, or you're discussing it. I was sharing this with a good friend of mine, and one of the things you cannot teach is motivation and hunger and desire, right? You can teach someone maybe a skill, right, to do something, but if they're not hungry, motivated, they don't have the desire to excel and exceed and move their life and have move the needle in the right direction. Um, those folks will always just be workers, and there's a need for those as well, right? Folks like you and I will need them, right? They'll fill a void for what we need, because that's all they're doing is
And I
they're
mean,
fulfilling someone
I'm a
else's.
worker myself now. I'm working towards not being, but I'm still working a 9 to 5 job. I am trying to, invest my way out of that. But I don't think that there's any shame, starting somewhere. I think that it's just about, what's your vision, and I know that you talk a lot about that. Don't make one investment and then just like drop your job.
Yep. No, absolutely. You need I think everyone needs the work experience, right? Because that's where you put value into yourself. Everyone's an enterprise. You're a walking, living, breathing enterprise, right? So you're trading every day your value for a dollar, right? For currency, for money. And it doesn't matter where you work, but that's essentially what you're doing. And if you feel that your value is more than what you're being paid, you gotta have built-in value. You gotta provide that a higher value. Um, and but how do you exponentially grow is once you figure out that, well, there's only so many hours in a day, and if even if I had the highest value for my time and you're trading it, you're only going to get so far. And so you need to figure out how to create residual and passive income as well. And you got to make that as part of your strategy. And I think that that's where some folks, fail. And those that figure it out they'll eventually exponentially grow.
I think that that's such an important point because we are humans and we are limited in how much effort we can put into anything. I mean, you only have 24 hours, so there's only a span of time that you can work, max yourself out. I mean, maybe you can go 2 to 3 days without sleep and work 24 hours, but at some point you're not a machine, so you're gonna max that amount of money that you're gonna be able to generate overall.
I agree. My first business was it was a travel, then it turned into a transportation business, and then it was exclusive transportation. It was pretty much a shuttle business from the Merrimack Valley area to Logan Airport. But how many times can you drive to Logan Airport and back?
Mm-hmm.
So your growth is limited, and as much as you want to hustle, as much as you want to get up, bright and early and stay up late, taking folks or picking them up, you were limited by the amount of times that you can get in and out of Logan Airport. So it was not, it was hard to scale that. So again, once you figure out how to scale and create that residual and passive income and make money as while you're sleeping, as they say, right? Warren Buffett says, if you're not making money while you're sleeping, then you're missing out here.
Right.
So it was only in my later years or the last number of years that I figured out that that's one of the keys to really exponentially getting out of that rat race.
So was the shuttle business the first one you did after you got out of school, or was there something else in between?
No, that was the first one. So it was like
First
I
one was the
mentioned.
shuttle.
Yeah, I was in college. I had a co-op. I hated it, and I just said I want to start my own business. And but due to technology, what happened was I started the travel business, and this is now 30 years ago that you started to see the Travelocities, the Expedias, people were no longer needing to and having to go to an agent, right, to go get their airline tickets or their cruise tickets or packages. Now, what do most people do? They search online.
Right.
They cut out those agents. So the industry changed, but the transportation still was that there was a high demand for it. And hence, that's why I was doing that exclusively afterwards. But again, how many times can you get in and out of the airport?
So here's something that I want to ask is that, so for you, it seemed like it was almost a no-brainer to go into business for yourself and do something for yourself. Is that an accurate statement?
Well, once I started it, I didn't know,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
I maybe if you posing the question makes me think maybe that was the start, right? Me not liking the job that I had forced me to go look for something that I wanted to do on my own, and that's how I started.
So when does real estate and like this passive income thing come into the picture? Like how are you introduced, or how are you exposed to like this new mentality that you didn't have at first?
I think one of the most important things is having a mentor.
Gotcha.
So early on, I followed an individual that I still, I talk to all the time, and I run ideas by and consult with this individual, and doing a lot of reading on my own, self-learning. I just really just dove all in about learning the industry. And once I realized that the vast a lot, just a high percentage of people that were doing very, very well. And the folks that I was reading about had real estate as part of their portfolio income or their passive income, and allowed them to grow exponentially. So there was that common thread. And, it was 1997 that I had an opportunity to get into the banking industry. I left the small business that I had, and that's kind of the first steps in the real estate world. So I learned a little bit of banking, had an opportunity to, in Lawrence, become a planning board member, commissioner, a planning board. Board members had a commissioner for each community, so I played the role of commissioner for a few years.
How old are you at this time?
And so this is the, so it was about, I was about 27.
27. Okay.
Yeah, about 26, 27. 97. So yeah, about 26 years old. And that was the path. I got my broker's license. Subsequently after that, I got my unrestricted construction supervisor's license, started building out my own, parcels of land in the Lawrence market. So I was learning, development, construction, permitting, banking, financing. So it wasn't one vertical, one course, one career. There were a number of things that were happening all at the same time, and I was learning and expanding my knowledge in the industry, and I still am. And for that person that says that they've pretty much tapped out on learning, then that's when they, essentially stop learning and stop growing.
So for people that don't, may not necessarily, what does a broker, like when you get your broker license, what did that allow you to do?
A broker just essentially allows you to open up your own firm. So you can become a salesperson, right? Also known as an agent, a real estate agent. But a salesperson has to work for a broker for, I believe it's now 3 years, and you have to have so many hours that the broker would sign off if you wanted to become a broker, to sign off that, yes, they've worked so many hours with my firm. Now, there are brokers that have attained that status that do not want to open up their own firm, don't want to have that responsibility. Okay. But they become associate brokers and they work under a broker. I just knew that I started off with a firm, and it was one of the national companies. And after the first year, at that time, it was 1 year minimum. I did the 1 year, went right for my broker's license, and I wanted to start my own thing. I just wanted to be independent. At that point, I just knew whatever I was doing, I wanted to, for the most part, be on my own and create my own opportunities.
That didn't scare you at all?
At that time, when you feel like you can jump off of 20-story building and still survive, right? We're all naive at one point. I didn't really care at that time. I just knew I wanted to give it a shot. I wanted to try it. And then if you have that hunger and desire and you really want it to succeed, you just find a way to make it work. So, but don't, I don't want to give also the impression that I completely left, the earned income still at that time. So there was a transition period. There was a transition period where I was a business manager for a big construction job for the state. And I did that for 3 years during that time. And that was after I had the development, career, and I had the Reyes Group company going at that time. There was a 3-year period where I took advantage of an opportunity. During that time, it was during the Governor Paul Cellucci administration. Um, and then I went back on full time on my own. And then there was another opportunity that I took in, this is in 2010 to about 2013, another 3 years that I became vice president of a large property management company,
Oh wow.
and took that experience, uh, and got, again, continuously learning, got some certifications through the National Apartment Association, Community Associations Institute, and the Institute of Real Estate Management. Continued growing my professional career.
I'm glad that you shared that, because when you were first, naming all these things that you were doing, I'm sure somebody, I mean, I have a little bit of experience with real estate, but I'm sure somebody that hasn't even considered real estate as a thing is looking at, is hearing you, talk about all these things that you did, and they're like, dude, I could never do any of this. But it really sounds like it was a step-by-step process for you, and that management company really helped you be able, well, at least you used that experience to really get familiar, and you just took it one step at a time.
Yeah, I think that what most folks need to focus in on is, if they're employed, is to take advantage of opportunities that their employer will give them. And when I joined the firm that I was with, Lane Management, there were folks there that were there for 23, 30 years. And essentially, I was initially hired as the marketing director, then the leasing director. And I bypassed those individuals that had been there for years, and I became the VP of operations. Uh, I was hungrier. I was hungrier. There was all these course, courses and certifications that were available. No one took advantage of them. I took advantage of all of them. And there were even some competing courses that were very similar. I took them anyways, just because I wanted to be a student of the game, right, of the industry. I just wanted to continuously grow and learn the business. And in 2013, they sold to a national company, and that's what brought me to the last 7 years, 2013 to 2020 today. I said I wanted to, go full blown again by myself, and I started Hancock, the namesake of where I grew up, the Hancock Projects, and I started Hancock Realty Group, and I started offering my professional property management services to small market owners. And I felt that with my certifications and experience, that there was a lot of value to small market owners. And that's kind of where I started, and where I've dedicated the last 7 years to.
So a lot of people would listen to all these things that you did and all these courses that you took, and I think that one of the questions that would come up inevitably, I think, is like, well, I don't have that time. I have a family, I have kids, I gotta take them here and there. Like, how somebody that I don't want to say an excuse, but somebody that's looking at what you're doing wants to potentially do that, but in their mind it's like, well, I'm not gonna be able to do anything that Izzy is doing because I just don't have the time. Like, what do you say to somebody that has that in the back of the mind and potentially is not allowing them to get started and get going?
I'm not even the best example, to be honest with you. I always reference my wife. So my wife, again, went to community college in New York. She was from the New York area and migrated to Lawrence. And so she had her associates, but she wanted her bachelor's. So now she's a manager at New York Life. She ended off as a senior manager, but she was a manager there. Being a mother, wife, taking care of household and the kids, working full time, and being pregnant of our second child,
Wow.
and still went to Merrimack College during the evenings to finish off her bachelor's degree. So if you can beat that, I can't even come close to that. I can't say I was ever pregnant with anyone. I can't say, working, for a large company and having the responsibilities that she had, plus the, being the unbelievable mom that she is, and just raising kids. So it can be done, but she was determined, she was focused, and she said, I'm going to do this. And here in my office, there's we don't hang too many things on the wall, but on our wall is my college degree and her college degree, and we let our kids see it, and more so for the commitment, the desire. I mean, there's anything that you want to do, you can do. It's just, are you willing to sacrifice and commit to it? So,
Right. Sounds like I'm gonna have to interview your wife too, man. She sounds incredible. From what you're saying is that where there's a will, there's a way. Regardless of the situation,
absolutely,
you'll figure it out. And I,
absolutely,
and I
absolutely.
think I think that was a great example with your wife. I mean, it's incredible. That's a lot of stuff to take on. It's awesome. Um, so if somebody, so let's say somebody hasn't had any experience with real estate or passive income, can we like give them a quick synopsis as to why is this so important? That's part one. And part two, how do I get started? Like, what should I be doing to try to generate some of this passive income, and particularly for this conversation, through real estate, which is where you've managed to be able to do that.
Well, it's a biased answer, but no one's convinced me that there's an alternative, better way. And a lot of the folks that um, we read about, right, the books that people recommend, and they talk about, those folks have real estate in their portfolios. And for me, I'm not knocking the stock market. There's some folks that have done very well, and alternative investments. But to me, for the tax benefit, the ability to optimize an asset, to have recurring income, it's taxed differently. Earned incomes are taxed higher than passive income earners. The ability to take equity that you've built up and deploy it into another asset. I mean, no one's convinced me that there is an alternative that is better than real estate. And if properly managed, properly taken care of, it'll do well by you, and it will grow, and it will grow for you long term.
So playing the devil's advocate a little bit, somebody that is more into, like, let's say the stock market would say, well, you shouldn't get into real estate because one, you're gonna be up at 2 a.m., unclogging toilets, and most tenants are gonna be a nightmare. You're gonna have to deal with that. And when it comes to the stock market, as long as you pick some good stocks, it's relatively passive. You don't have to do anything. You put your money in and you just watch it grow. Like, that's more or less the I think that a lot of the response, the majority of the responses would be when it comes to somebody that's advocating for a stock market approach versus real estate. Like, what would be your response to that?
Easy. To me, it's a simple answer, in my opinion. if you're talking about someone that's, you just said starting off, well, they're not, I would not put them into the portfolio income. I mean, how much money can they actually put in and put it into a stock or a mutual fund that's going to pay a dividend on how much? What are you putting in? $100 a pay period, 200, 500? How much are you getting back? That's number one. So there's some folly in that, and the theory of that, because we're talking about people that are just starting off. How do you start off? Well, you're not making portfolio income.
Mm.
The people that are making portfolio income that have millions of dollars, and even if they got 3.5, 4, 5%, well, that's a lot of money if you have a lot of, if you have millions into it,
You have a
right?
lot of cash in there, yeah.
Yeah. And secondly, I think that, and this is where there's another folly in the whole equation about uh, investing in that market, is that if I pay $10 for XYZ share, well, the way I make a capital gain is I hope that the next person behind me pays 12. Now I just made 20%. And I don't like that. I don't like that I have to rely on the next person behind me buying that stock or mutual fund at a higher rate, and for me to get out to get a capital gains. And if I held it for a short period of time, now I'm paying the short-term capital gains tax. So it's not something that I can go back to and say, XYZ stock, I'd like to purchase this stock now. Can I get some of this? And they're like, no, you're stuck here. And depending on what's going on with the market, and if it's a volatile market in that time frame, you probably can't, because it's like any other investment. It's long term. So those are the two primary reasons I don't necessarily like it. Unless you have the one large capital investment that's going to give you that portfolio income, then it could be part of the portfolio and strategy. And then the second thing is just having someone, or hoping someone comes in after you and pays more for that stock. And that's how you're going to make your money. So it's kind of out of my hands, and hoping that the market does well. And that's why I would argue against it for someone that's starting off.
And you prefer real estate because for the most part, it's under your control. It's going to be relying on you, Izzy, to be able to not only make the right investment, but be able to maintain it in such a way that it will yield an income for you.
That's right. If you learn the fundamentals of real estate, and those things that you mentioned earlier, the late night calls, the leaky toilets and what have you, if you understand it, those issues should be far in between. When you get that call, they shouldn't be a consistent call on a daily basis, weekly basis. You should be doing, checks, maintenance checks and capital improvements that will avoid those types of issues. So once you've been a little bit, get some training behind you, it should become clockwork, and you have the right people as part of your team, right? Vendors and what have you, that address those types of issues. That
have you had to go and clean some toilets in the middle of the night?
I mean, I've been involved with some issues, but I'm not the handyman. I can tell you that. I love being involved with my properties that I own, and at the end of the day, I have folks that just know how to, unclog the lines, the main lines, and what have you, and address issues that are related to owning property.
This is a key point, and I want to emphasize on this, is that a lot of people feel like they need to be an electrician and they need to be a plumber in order to be able to get into a property. Like, I'll give you a quick example. I was talking to a gentleman, probably in his 40s, and I'm letting him, hey, real estate, and we just chopping it up a little bit, and he mentioned, like, before I even consider investing in real estate, I'm going to go and take an electrician course. I'm going to go and take a plumbing course. So if anything ever comes up, then I'm going to be able to take care of it, and I won't have to hire somebody. I think that he's still trying to become an electrician or a plumber before he invests in real estate.
Yeah, I think that there's some folly in that mentality as well, because if you're not up in the tower overlooking which runways are being used, who should be taking off, who should be landing, you lose the bigger picture. I think that a good property manager will be up in the tower directing traffic and optimizing their assets so they're getting highest and best return on their investment. If you're tied up trying to do plumbing and electrical and handyman work and not deferring that to the people that's all that they do, I think you're going to be missing a number of things that is not necessarily optimizing your asset.
Yeah, at least, for me, I'm not handy at all, man. Like, I mean, I can YouTube some stuff, but I think that the key point here is that you need to make sure that whenever you are ready to invest, you calculate for those expenses, that you are going to need a handyman. You are going to need people that are going to be able to do things that you may not necessarily know how to do. But if you take that into account at the beginning, then you shouldn't fear having to hire somebody later on when they do come up.
Yeah, and part of the learning curve is understanding your role, right? You're the quarterback, and you have to tell people where to go and where to be, and have the personnel to put in place to execute the strategy. Because if you're trying to be all things in the organization, I think you're going to lose a lot of opportunities.
Gotcha. So as we kind of wind down here a little bit, um, going back to that person that is seeing this for the first time, they're not, they haven't thought about real estate, but they've listened to you, they've listened, they've heard the talk on the rat race. They do want to create some passive income. How do they get started? They haven't saved up because that wasn't in their preview, but now they're ready to get started. Like, how does one get started on planning and eventually executing on getting that property that will generate some more income for them?
I think that one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of people look at real estate as, and they want to get into it, and they make this common mistake. And I'm actually, an offender of my own rule. I want to own. I buy my first property. Well, property is a liability. And if you look at it and purchase it that way, that's all it is. It's a liability. But if you buy a property as an asset that's going to produce something for you, it's a whole different, that's the game changer. And that's why I tell people that there's a number of things that you want to do to set yourself up for your first purchase, but whatever it is, make sure that it's an asset, and it's a residential asset. And for those that are not familiar with the terminology, well, let's talk liability and asset. Liability is if you buy a single family home, well, it's just a liability. You're paying it every single month. You're not getting anything out of it. If you buy a 2, a 3, or a 4, that's the difference between residential property and commercial. Anytime you throw in the word commercial, a lot of people think about industrial park, retail parks, Malls, that's commercial. Well, there's a thing called commercial residential. That's 5 units or above. So when I say residential, all I'm just referring to is multifamily residential is 2 units up to as high as four. You're still in the residential space. And what it does is it allows you to cash flow, even if it's the unit next door. And if you have a 4 unit, you in the industry, it's called house hacking. You live in one, you rent out the other three, you take the cash flow and you start to build it. You build it, one, you optimize it, and then you're trying to cash out some of that equity to populate it and deploy it into another asset that's going to consistently and continuously produce money for you.
Can you I think that I think that's perfect. I think that just as you in your career you did a step by step, same way in this case, your first step is, hey, look at some of the programs that are out there that may allow you to be able to get into a property with a little bit less down. FHA comes to mind, 3.5% down, and just start saving. And once you get to that point, or as you're on your way to that, start reading some books and start listening to some podcasts. Maybe start making some connections of people that can teach you a few things. And I think that even for me, I mean, I'm a new, we have, some properties, etc. And I'll tell you, man, it's scary because there's so many unknowns. But at the same time, I can attest to the fact that you rise to the occasion as things come up. Those are learning moments. And I think that you should look at this entire process in that way. Every single step, every single mistake, everything that's going to come up in this process, if you do choose to take it on, look at it as a learning experience. And if you look at it that way, you're going to continue to move forward and eventually end up in a situation where you're in, or even greater. It's just looking at it, taking a student's mentality and just look at every step as a learning opportunity.
Absolutely. And I think that anytime that there's, difficult times in general, that's what gives separation. Mm. Opportunities like that. And notice how I use the word opportunity, right? Yeah. It's an opportunity to separate yourself.
Right.
Okay. How are you going to deal with it? No one's immune to not having issues. Everyone's going to have issues in their own respective worlds, right? Their business, their properties that they own, their work, or what have you. But the difference is, how did I address it? Right? Most people don't want to see, they have a hard time addressing issues and that are hard. And some could be very straightforward, simple issues. They just don't want the confrontation. They don't want to deal with the issue. And others excel, and that's why they're at where they're at, right? Because they've excelled at addressing, hurdles and issues and hiccups in their world.
So as we finish up here, wrap up, I want to ask if you could potentially share with us one mistake that you made in the real estate world, because I think that everybody that will be listening to this or is listening to this is looking at Izzy. Izzy is this great businessman, has built all these things and has made no mistakes. But can you share with us something or a mistake or a learning opportunity that came up in your process to help us and let us know that you can make mistakes and still succeed, in creating a passive income through real estate?
Well, there were a lot of mistakes, and I think that I still make them because they're just at different levels, right? But for me is, I read one book and I know it all. When you have that mentality, now you're littered. There's a number of mistakes that are going to happen. And what I've learned is, just because you know a little bit, right? It doesn't stop the learning curve. It's a constant, consistent, evolving market. And that's true for all spaces, all industries. There's no exception, including the real estate. And so what I've learned is just consistently staying on top of rules, regulations, tenant landlord laws, you name it. Just being a student of the game, of your profession, of your industry, real estate being my full-time occupation. And I just try to learn as much as possible constantly. So I'm plugged into certain, subscriptions, and I'm a member of the Institute of Real Estate Management. I could have easily said, well, what do they do for me? Right. Versus taking those, the emails, the publications, the trainings that they give, you name it, and constantly staying on top of current trends. And I think early on, I was the opposite. I learned a little bit. I learned how to do a transaction and say, I got this, when in reality, it's just, I got that piece of it, but there was a million other pieces that I, needed to stay on top of, because things are evolving constantly. So it's just education, education, education with a major, is a major component in making a big difference.
Man, that's so true. And I really just want to take a moment to just thank you for your time. I mean, I think that I've learned a lot. I'm sure that the people that watch this are going to learn a ton as well. And we're definitely going to have to do a part two, because we didn't even get into currency. We didn't get into inflation, deflation, what all that means. Why is this so important? There's so many other topics that I think that you've shared with me that have opened up my eyes that I think the audience should know as well. So before I give you the floor and kind of let you share any final thoughts to the audience here, I want to ask you a question. Is there anybody that you can think of that I should be reaching out to, or that I should potentially introduce to this project, to have them on and get their thoughts, opinions, and ideas to share with the community, and specifically the Hispanic community?
Yeah, well, I think a mutual friend that we both know, attorney Socrates de la Cruz, be a great, great candidate. We actually lived same age, grew up in the same neighborhood. So I mean, he's a great example of having nothing and look at where he's at now. And that's just pure grit, hard work, dedication, determined, disciplined, and learning the trade. And we're both students of the game. And he was in the legal field and I was in real estate a little longer, but we're both students of our professions. And I think he'd be a great person to share his story as well.
And it's funny how both of you also ended up in the real estate side of things. So that's awesome. So any final thoughts from you as we close here?
No, I mean, thank you for having me on. Hopefully our conversation is of value to those that are listening. One of the exciting things that I'm working on, just to kind of share this on this podcast here, Hancock Real Estate Academy is coming out soon. And that's for those that are interested in pursuing a career in real estate, and more specifically in property management. That's been my passion over the last number of years. And that's what got my start into the investing piece of it, and learning about 1031s, opportunity zones, syndication funds. It all started with property management, and it gave me opportunities. So for those that are interested but not sure how to even start, right? I feel free. I'm not sure if you can put on your chat or information on your blog here, my contact information. I'm sorry?
We'll definitely link it.
Yeah, so you can share my email, Izzy at HancockInvestmentGroup.com. Have them reach out. And I'll keep them posted on when we're going to launch that in early 2021. And we're just going to go over all the different pieces of what it takes to get into the property management field, whether it be potentially working for someone early on or even starting their own firm. So that's
Awesome.
exciting stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds pretty cool. Awesome, man. Well, thank you for your time.
My pleasure, Manny. As
Bye,
always.
everybody.
Thank you, guys.